don't go inside." The girl's voice came from behind the tool shed, so quiet it could have been the wind through the hedgerow. But it wasn't the wind. It was a child 9 years old, standing in the shadow of the shed's open door with her hands pressed flat against her sides like she was trying to hold herself together. Edwin Prescott stopped walking. He had been crossing the back lawn toward the sunroom, where his wife had told him breakfast was waiting. He was carrying a cup of coffee he had made himself in the kitchen, something he almost never did, but the cook had not arrived yet, and the morning was already running behind. It was a Saturday. The light was soft and pale. The sprinklers had just shut off, and the grass was still dark with water. "What did you say?" he asked. He knew the girl. She was the groundskeeper's daughter. Her name was Zola. She had been living on the property for a little over 2 years, ever since her mother, Denise Carter, had taken the position after the previous groundskeeper retired to North Carolina. Edwin had seen Zola many times walk on the gravel path behind the greenhouse, with a library book under her arm, sitting cross-legged on the stone bench near the koi pond, drawing in a spiral notebook while her mother trimmed the boxwood along the south wall. He had never spoken to her directly, not once. He felt a small shame about this now, standing on the wet grass, looking down at a child whose face was the color of someone who had not slept. "Please don't go in there," Zola whispered. "There's a man in the sunroom. He's not supposed to be there. I heard them last night. They're going to hurt you." Edwin looked toward the sunroom. Through the tall glass panels, he could see the breakfast table set for two. White plates, a small vase of yellow flowers, a folded newspaper beside his chair. Everything arranged the way his wife, Margot, always arranged it on Saturday mornings. Precise, warm, deliberate. He could not see anyone else's inside. "Zola," he said carefully. "Who is the Mrs. Prescott?" the girl said. "And the man?" "The one who comes at night when you're not home. He was here last night. They were in the kitchen. I heard everything through the vent in my room." Edwin felt the coffee cup grow heavy in his hand. Not because it weighed more, but because his fingers had gone slightly numb. He set the cup down on the stone ledge beside the garden path, crouched so that his eyes were level with the girl's. "Tell me exactly what you heard." Zola took a breath. Her voice did not shake, but her shoulders did. "She said it would happen this morning. She said you always come to the sunroom first because you like to read the paper before anyone else is awake. She said the man would be waiting inside. She said after today everything would be hers. The house, the company, everything. She said the papers were already signed." Edwin Prescott was 63 years old. He had spent 4 decades building a commercial real estate firm that now owned properties in 9 states. He had survived a hostile takeover in 2011, a federal audit in 2016, and a partnership dispute that had gone to trial and lasted 14 months. He had trained himself over many years to absorb information without reacting, to listen the way a wall listens, to show nothing until he had decided what to show. But this was not a boardroom. "How do you know this is about me?" he asked very quietly. "Because she said your name. She said Edwin. She said it twice. And then the man said, 'What about the staff?' And she said, 'The groundskeeper leaves at 6 on Saturdays. The cook doesn't come until 9. The girl stays in her room.' She meant me." Edwin looked at Zola. He looked at her worn sneakers, her braided hair, the spiral notebook she was clutching against her chest like a shield. He looked at the dark circles under her eyes, and he understood that this child had carried this weight alone through an entire night. "Did you tell your mother?" "No. She was already asleep when I heard it, and this morning she left early. She had to pick up mulch from the garden center. She won't be back until 10, Edwin nodded slowly. He stood up and looked once more at the sunroom. Now through the angled glass he saw something he had missed. A shadow, not a chair, not a curtain. A figure standing just inside the far wall near the door that connected the sunroom to the main hallway. The figure was not moving, it was waiting. "Come with me," Edwin said. They walked together along the back of the house, close to the stone foundation beneath the windows. Edwin moved the way he had not moved in decades, low and careful, his hand occasionally touching the wall for balance. They passed the laundry room, the service entrance, the narrow alley between the garage and the east wing where the recycling bins were kept. When they reached the front of the property, Edwin led Zola to the small maintenance building near the gate, the one with the riding mower and the fertilizer bags and a single wooden chair where Denise sometimes sat during her lunch break. "Stay here," he said. "Lock the door from inside. Do not open it for anyone except me or your mother. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." "Zola." He paused. He wanted to say something larger, something that matched what she had done, but the words were not available to him yet. "Thank you," he said. It was not enough, but it was true. He closed the door. He heard the lock turn. Then he walked to the front gate, let himself out, and stood the sidewalk in the pale morning light of a street he had lived on for 22 years. He took out his phone and called the only person he trusted without condition. Philip Crane answered on the second ring. Philip had been his attorney for 26 years. They had met in law school, lost touch, reconnected at a bar association dinner in 1998, and had not gone more than a week without speaking since. Philip was the kind of man who kept 2 phones, 3 locks on his office door, and 0 tolerance for surprises. Philip, I need you to listen without asking questions for the next 3 minutes. Go, Edwin told him. He told him in the flat, measured voice of a man reporting a structural failure in a building he owns. He told him about Zola, about the conversation she had overheard, about the shadow in the sunroom, about Margot's words. He spoke for exactly 3 minutes. Philip was quiet for 4 seconds after he finished. Then he said, "Where are you right now?" "Standing on the sidewalk outside my own house." "Get off the property. Walk north to the Dunmore intersection. I will have a car there in 12 minutes. Do not go back inside. Do not call Margot. Do not call the police yet." "Why not the police?" "Because if she's done what that child says she's done, there is paperwork behind it. Insurance changes, trust amendments, beneficiary clauses. I need to see what she's moved before we give her any reason to start moving things back." 12 minutes, Edwin. Walk. Edwin walked. He passed houses he had waved to from his car for 2 decades. He passed the Henderson's stone mailbox, the Drummond's blue shutters, the empty lot on the corner where a developer had cleared the trees last spring and then abandoned the project. He walked and he thought about Margot. He thought about 20 Phil. He thought about 24 years of marriage. He thought about the trip to Maine where they had rented a cabin and it had rained for 6 days straight, and they had played cards by the fireplace, and she had laughed so hard at his shuffling that she spilled wine on the rug. He thought about the way she always folded his reading glasses into their case before bed and set them on his nightstand. He thought about the yellow flowers on the breakfast table, set there this morning by a woman who had planned for him not to finish the meal. The car arrived at the Dunmore intersection in 11 minutes. It was a dark blue sedan driven by a man Edwin did not recognize, but who handed him a note through the window in Philip's handwriting. "Get in, Philip." They drove to a small law office on Birch Street that Philip kept for overflow work and sensitive matters. It was a single room above a dry cleaner, with a desk, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet, and a window that looked out onto the back of a pharmacy. Philip was already there, standing beside the desk with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled to the forearms, the way he always looked when something had gone very wrong and he intended to fix it. "Sit down," Philip said. "I have been making calls since we hung up. Here is what I know so far." He opened a manila folder and laid 3 documents on the desk. "Your life insurance policy, originally issued 18 years ago. Coverage was $5 million, standard for your net worth at the time. 8 years ago, after the Meridian acquisition, it was increased to $14 million. I reviewed both adjustments. They were clean." He tapped the 3rd document. 11 months ago, the policy was modified again. Coverage raised to $42 million. An accidental death clause was added, which doubles the payout under certain conditions. The beneficiary structure was simplified. All contingency language was removed. Margot is now the sole and unconditional beneficiary. There is no secondary. There is no trust override. There is no board review clause. Edwin stared at the page. He could see a signature at the bottom. It looked like his. "I did not sign this," he said. "I know you didn't. You were in Denver 11 months ago at the Ridgeway closing. I was with you. We had dinner at that Italian place near the hotel, the one with the bad lighting. You did not leave the state for 4 days. Then how the signature was notarized by a woman named Cheryl Boone, operating out of a small office in Stamford, Connecticut. I have already contacted her. She says she witnessed the signing in person. She described the man who signed as tall, gray-haired, early 60s. She did not ask for photo identification because, she said, the man was accompanied by his wife, who presented a driver's license and confirmed his identity." Edwin sat very still. "Margot took someone to Stamford," he said. "Yes. Someone who looked enough like me. Yes." Edwin leaned back in the chair. He looked at the ceiling. There was a water stain in the corner shaped like the state of Ohio. He stared at it for a long time. "Who is he?" Edwin asked. "The man in my house." Philip sat down across from him. "I called Rachel Dunn. You remember her. She handled the due diligence on the Halcyon deal. She is the best investigator I know, and she does not talk to anyone she is not paid to talk to. She has been working since 7:30 this morning. And the man's name, as far as your wife knows him, is Nathan Cross. He has been presenting himself as a private wealth consultant. He has business cards. He has a website. He has a LinkedIn profile with 400 connections and a photograph taken in front of a bookshelf. None of it is real. The website was registered 9 months ago. The business cards were printed at a shop in Bridgeport. The LinkedIn profile uses a stock photograph that Rachel traced to a German modeling agency's archive from 2016. Then who is he? His real name is Derek Slade, Born in Racine, Wisconsin in 1979, he changed his name legally in 2012, 1 year after his first wife died. Edwin felt the air in the room grow thinner. How did she die? Carbon monoxide poisoning. She was found in the garage of their home in Green. The car engine was running. The garage door was closed. The investigation concluded it was accidental. She had a history of migraines and had been prescribed medication that caused drowsiness. The insurance payout was $2.7 million. He was the sole beneficiary, and after that, in 2015, he became engaged to a woman in Portland, Oregon. She was a real estate developer. The engagement lasted 5 months. She ended it after discovering inconsistencies in his financial disclosures. She filed a restraining order. He left the state. And then, in 2018, he married a woman named Gloria Fenn in Scottsdale, Arizona. She was 58 years old. He was 39. She had no children. She had a net worth of approximately $11 million. They were married for 20 months. She died in a fall from the balcony of their home. The medical examiner ruled it accidental. Alcohol was found in her system. The insurance payout was $6.1 million. Philip closed the folder. And now he is in your sunroom, waiting for you to walk in and sit down at a table your wife set for you this morning. Edwin did not speak for a long time. The sounds of the dry cleaner below rose faintly through the floor. The hiss of steam, the rhythmic clunk of the pressing machine. Ordinary sounds in an ordinary morning. She knows what he is? Edwin asked finally. I cannot say for certain. Rachel's assessment is that Margot likely knows him as Nathan Cross, a man she has been involved with for approximately 14 months. Whether she knows about Green Bay or Scottsdale is unclear. But she knows about the insurance. She knows about the forged signature. She participated in both. Edwin rubbed his face with both hands. He pressed his fingers into his eyes until he saw small bright shapes. Then he lowered his hands and looked at Philip. What are the options? Option 1. We call the police now. We have the child's testimony, the insurance fraud, the forged signature, Rachel's findings on Slade's history. It is enough for an investigation. They will move on the house today. Margot will be questioned. Slade will be arrested. The case will take months, possibly years, but it will move forward. And option 2? Philip leaned forward. We let Slade believe the plan can still work. We create another opportunity. We watch, we listen, we document, and we catch him not on intent alone, but on action. We give the prosecutors a case that no defense attorney in the country can unravel. He has done this twice before and walked away both times. Yes, then we do it the second way. Philip nodded slowly. I thought you would say that. That afternoon, Edwin checked into a residence inn on the west side of the city, under the name Philip had arranged. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the beige walls and the framed print of a covered bridge that hung above the dresser. He had not stayed in a room like this in 30 years. He did not mind it. His phone buzzed, a text from Margot. Where are you? I made breakfast and you never came in. Are you at the office? He typed back. Emergency call from the Ridgeway group. Had to go in early. Sorry about breakfast. We'll be back tonight, she replied with a heart emoji. He stared at the small red shape on his screen for a long time. That evening, Edwin drove back to the house. He used Philip's car, a gray Volvo that smelled like leather and peppermint. He parked in the driveway at 6:15. Carried his briefcase to the front door, and let himself in the way he had 10,000 times before. Margot was in the living room. She was wearing a pale green cardigan and reading a magazine. She looked up when he came in, and her face opened into a smile that he now understood was a performance, not because it looked false, but because he had finally learned to see the effort behind it. There you are, she said. Long day? The longest in a while. He set his briefcase down. The Ridgeway people are impossible. You always say that, because they always are. She laughed. It was a real laugh, or at least it used to be. He could no longer tell the difference, and this, more than anything, was what hurt. They had dinner. She had ordered from the Italian place on Elm Street, the one he liked, the one with the bread that came warm in a cloth napkin. She poured him a glass of the Barolo they had brought back from Piedmont 3 years ago. She asked him about the Ridgeway call, and he answered with enough detail to be convincing. She told him about her afternoon, about the book she was reading, about the neighbor's dog that had gotten into the garden again. He listened to all of it. He ate. He drank. He smiled at the right moments. After dinner, she suggested they watch something. They sat on the sofa. She leaned against his shoulder. He could feel her breathing. He could smell her shampoo, the lavender one she had used for as long as he could remember. He thought about the woman he had married in a small church in Virginia, the woman who had held his hand through his mother's funeral, the woman who had surprised him on his 50th birthday with a first edition of the book he had loved as a boy. He thought about how it was possible to sit beside someone you had known for 24 years and you had never known nor years and realize you had never known them at all. At 10 o'clock, she said she was tired. She kissed him on the forehead and went upstairs. Edwin waited 20 minutes. Then he walked quietly through the house to the back door, crossed the dark lawn, and knocked softly on the door of the maintenance building. Denise Carter opened it. She had come back from the garden center that morning to find Zola locked inside, and Zola had told her everything. Denise had not called anyone. She had not panicked. She had simply held her daughter, fed her lunch, and waited. "Mr. Prescott," she said. She stepped back to let him in. Zola was asleep on a cot in the corner, a blanket pulled up to her chin, her spiral notebook on the floor beside her, open to a page covered in small pencil drawings of birds. Edwin stood in the doorway and looked at her. "Denise," he said quietly, "I owe you the truth. Not all of it tonight, but enough." He told her what he could. He told her that Zola had been right, that there had been a plan, that the plan had not succeeded because her daughter had the courage to speak. He told her that people were watching the property, that she and Zola were safe, and that within a few days this would be resolved. Denise listened without expression. When he finished, she said, "She drew the same bird 47 times this week. I counted. I knew something was wrong. I asked her, and she told me nothing was wrong. She was protecting me. Yes, she's 9. I know." They stood in the small building with the smell of mulch and gasoline and the sound of a child breathing. "What happens next?" Denise asked. "I finish this," Edwin said, "and then we talk about what comes after." The next 3 days were the longest of Edwin Prescott's life. He moved through his house like a man walking through a museum exhibit of his own existence. He ate breakfast at the small table. He read the paper. He kissed Margot on the cheek when he passed her in the hallway. He took phone calls in his study with the door closed, and when she asked who had called, he said, "Philip, the usual." On the third evening, over dinner, he mentioned the trip. "I need to drive up to Hartford on Friday. The Mercer Building inspection. I've put it off twice already." Margot set down her fork. She did not react immediately. She took a sip of water, dabbed her lip with her napkin, and then said, "Of course. Will you be back for dinner?" "Should be. It's just the morning." "Drive safe," she said. And then, very softly, "I worry about you on those roads. I know you do." Friday morning, 6:45. The sky was the color of wet concrete. Edwin came downstairs in a dark blue suit, his overcoat folded over his arm. Margot was in the kitchen. She handed him a travel mug of coffee. She straightened the collar of his coat. She kissed him at the door. "Come home to me," she said. "I always do." He walked to the car in the driveway. It was a black Lincoln, arranged by Philip through a service that asked no questions. The driver was a man named Leon Ashby, who had worked for Philip's firm on security matters for 11 years, and who understood, without being told, that this was not an ordinary Friday morning. Edwin got into the back seat. Leon closed the door, walked around, and pulled the car smoothly out of the driveway. For the first 15 minutes, they drove in silence. They took Route 7 north, past the strip malls and the gas stations and the old stone church on the hill where Edwin had once attended a colleague's wedding. The traffic was light. The trees along the highway were just beginning to turn. Leon's eyes moved to the rearview mirror. "We have company," he said calmly. "Dark green SUV, 2 occupants. They joined us at the Wilton merge. They've been maintaining distance. How far? 4 cars back. Consistent." Edwin nodded. He looked out the window at the trees and thought about Gloria Fenn falling from a balcony in Scottsdale. He thought about a woman in Green Bay sitting in a garage with the engine running. He thought about the way certain kinds of evil move through the world, not in bursts but in patterns, the same quiet geometry repeated again and again until someone finally noticed the shape. They took the exit for Hartford. The road narrowed past the reservoir, a long curve of water held in by a low guardrail, and a stand of birch trees that leaned toward the road as if listening. Rachel Dunn's team had identified this stretch 3 days earlier. It matched the profile exactly, isolated, winding, water deep enough to swallow a car. The green SUV was still behind them. A second vehicle appeared ahead, a gray sedan parked at a gravel pullout near the water's edge. A man was standing beside it, leaning against the driver's door with his arms crossed. He was tall, lean, early 40s, with the careful grooming of someone who spent more time on his appearance than he admitted. Derek Slade, who called himself Nathan Cross, who had stood in Edwin's sunroom 4 days ago, waiting for a man who never arrived. "That's him," Edwin said. "I see him," Leon replied. "Drive past." Leon maintained speed. As they passed the pullout, Slade straightened and reached for his car door. In the side mirror, Edwin watched the green SUV close the distance. "Now," Edwin said. Leon pressed a button on his phone. 2 unmarked vehicles that had been parked around the next bend pulled across both lanes. The green SUV braked hard. A third vehicle, a black sedan that had been following from a fire access road, pulled in behind Slade's car and boxed it against the guardrail. It happened in less than 40 seconds. Men and women in plain clothes stepped out with the practiced efficiency of people who had done this many times before. The SUV doors were opened. Two men were pulled out and placed face down on the asphalt. Slade was already out of his car with his hands raised, his face carrying the expression of a man who had always believed he was the smartest person in any room and was now discovering for the first time that he was not. Leon pulled to the shoulder and stopped. He turned in his seat. "It's done," he said. "Not quite," Edwin said. He took out his phone. "Philip, they have the men on the road. Tell Detective Hargrove she can move on the house." Then he closed his eyes. He leaned his head back against the seat. He listened to the sound of water moving somewhere below the guardrail, patient and indifferent, the way water always is. When Edwin arrived back at the house 90 minutes later, the front of the property was quiet, in the way a place becomes quiet after something large has passed through it. Two unmarked cars sat near the front steps. A uniformed officer stood by the door. Detective Hargrove, a tall woman with close-cropped hair and the careful eyes of someone who had long ago stopped being surprised by what people were capable of, was waiting on the front walk. "She didn't run," the detective said. "She was sitting in the living room when we came in. She was holding the magazine she'd been reading. She looked at us for a long time, and then she said one thing." "What did she say?" "She said, 'He promised me no one would get hurt.'" She said it once, looking at the floor. Then she stood up and put her hands behind her back. Edwin nodded. He did not feel what he had expected to feel. There was no satisfaction. There was no relief. There was only the specific exhaustion of a man who has discovered that the most dangerous room in his life was the one where he slept. They brought Margot out a few minutes later. She walked between two officers, her back straight, her face neither defiant nor collapsed, but somewhere in between, the face of a person who had been holding two versions of herself together for a long time and had finally let go of both. As she passed Edwin on the walkway, she stopped. She did not speak. She looked at him, and in that look, he saw 24 years collapse into a single expression that contained everything and explained nothing. Then she walked on, and the officers guided her into the car, and the car pulled away down the street he had walked along 4 days ago, past the Hendersons' mailbox, past the Drummonds' blue shutters, past the empty lot on the corner and out of his life. The case moved forward with the weight of evidence that left no room for maneuvering. Derek Slade was charged with conspiracy, attempted murder, insurance fraud, and identity fraud within 72 hours. The investigations in Wisconsin and Arizona were reopened. New witnesses came forward in both. The driver from the green SUV cooperated fully and named every person involved. The forged signature from Stamford was matched to a man Slade had used twice before. Margot was charged as a co-conspirator. She did not fight the charges. Her attorney told the court she wished to enter a plea. Edwin did not attend the hearing. He had been there once, at the arraignment, and that had been enough. There were things, he had decided, that a man did not need to witness twice to understand. In the months that followed, the house changed. Not dramatically, not in the way a place changes after a demolition, but in the way a house changes when someone finally opens all the windows after a long winter. Edwin moved his bedroom to the east-facing room on the second floor, the one with the bay window and the reading chair he had bought 20 years ago and never sat in. He sold the Lincoln and bought a modest SUV that he drove himself. He gave Leon a permanent position with the firm, with a salary that made Leon shake his head for 10 minutes before accepting. Denise Carter stayed. Edwin had asked her if she wanted to, and she had taken a week to think about it, and then she had said yes. He converted the old carriage house at the back of the property into a proper home for her and Zola, with a real kitchen, a living room with bookshelves, and a small sunroom where Zola could draw in the afternoon light. Zola started at a new school in September. Edwin paid for it. He did not call it charity. He called it what it was, a debt that could not be repaid but could be honored. On a Saturday morning in early spring, nearly 7 months after the morning behind the tool shed, Edwin walked out into the garden and found Zola sitting on the stone bench near the koi pond. Her spiral notebook was open on her knees. She was drawing the dogwood tree that had just begun to bloom along the east fence. Edwin sat down beside her. "You still draw," he said. "My dad used to draw," Zola said, without looking up. "My mom says he drew on everything, napkins, envelopes, the margins of phone books. She says, I have his hands." Edwin had not known this. He looked at her small hands moving the pencil across the page with a steadiness that did not belong to a 9-year-old. "Then you come by it honestly," he said. They sat in silence for a while. The koi moved slowly beneath the surface of the pond, orange and white, turning in their quiet circles. "Mr. Prescott," Zola said. "Yes. Do you ever think about that morning?" He considered the question carefully, because she deserved a careful answer. "Sometimes," he said. "Not the way I did at first. But sometimes I wake up early and I hear a sound outside, a car engine, a door closing, and for a second I remember standing on the lawn and not knowing what was waiting for me inside my own house, and what I feel is not exactly fear. It is something closer to gratitude that has not yet learned how to be quiet. Zola nodded. She understood this in the way that children sometimes understand things that adults spend years trying to put into words. My mom says, she said, still drawing, that doing the right thing doesn't make everything easier, but it means you never have to look away from your own reflection. Edwin watched the dogwood petals drift slowly across the surface of the pond. He watched the koi rise to inspect them and then turn away. He watched the spring light settle over the garden like something that had been waiting a long time to arrive. Your mom is right, he said. She has been right about nearly everything.